Guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new to Flight Simulator, or perhaps your landings when you fly an A320 or 747 look like this. Oh no. Attention ladies and gentlemen, Tokyo Drift landing coming up! And hopefully this video will be for you. Now, I've personally found that when I'm flying the A320 and the 747, I found it really difficult to actually land. So taking off and flying around was perfectly fine, but the landing, I just never seemed to be able to line it up on the runway and get it done smoothly. So in today's video, I want to give you a rundown of a system called ILS, Instrument Landing System. Now, if you're after an in-depth tutorial on how to use ILS, especially if you want to use it when in the cabin of the plane, this video isn't for you. But if you're someone who just wants to be able to have smoother landings and not ruin their flying experience, then hopefully this video will be exactly what you're looking for. So to demonstrate ILS, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Sydney Airport. We're going to select Kingsford Smith as our departure. And then what we're going to do is we are going to scroll up and we will select Brisbane International. Actually, what we'll do, we'll go down and we'll select Melbourne as our destination. So arrival is Melbourne. And what it'll do is straight away just do a direct line. Isn't overly helpful, but if you want to go and explore yourself and just, fly around and eventually land at an airport, it's not too bad. What we want to do though, is we want to have a look just underneath our airplane. You can see we have VFR, which is direct GPS at the moment. If we drop that down, we want to have a look under the IFR tab, which is Instrument Flight Rules. So we're just going to choose Low Altitude Airways. And now you can see the line's a little bit different and it's making us go through some checkpoints. If we then have a look up to the top right, you can see we have an approach section. If we click on this, we have a whole bunch of options, and the ones we want to focus on are ILS. Don't worry about any of the other ones for now. So what we're going to do, we're just going to select the first one, which is ILS 16 Yankee. And when I click on that, all of a sudden you can see it changes the route. And if we zoom in, you can see what it wants us to do is come over here. Then we're going to turn left and you can see this purple approach section. So don't really worry too much about what that means now. It'll make more sense soon. But what we'll do now is we'll jump into the plane, get her up in the air, and I'll show you how to set our plane up for an ILS landing. And now we're on the tarmac here at Kingsford Smith. So if I show you our VFR map, you can see that our flight plan that we just punched in the menu, it will populate here. So it might just take a couple of minutes for this to show up. But if we have a look down at our MFD, you can see that our flight plan is already there. So what will happen is we'll take off. There you go, it's now populated. So we're going to take off and then hit autopilot. It's just going to follow all the way along here for us. We're not going to have to do anything. And then I will pick back up with you guys once we're closer to having to get the plane ready for descent, because as I say, we're going to use the ILS system to be able to do a nice smooth landing rather than having to just figure it all out ourselves. So we'll take off here. Once we have a positive climb, we'll flick on autopilot and then we will rejoin you when we're ready to get the aircraft ready for descent. And welcome back guys. So as you can see along our flight plan, we started off here in Sydney and now we've made our way over to here. So you might remember just earlier I was talking about a marker called decel, which is just here. Now what I was doing earlier was I was actually flying pretty much all the way on autopilot until this point, then trying to do my approach, which just did not work whatsoever because I'd be at like 30,000 odd feet. And then all of a sudden you'd get yelled at to drop down to 3,000. So that would just go terribly wrong. So I'm all the way back here and yet I've already dropped myself down to 10,000 feet, because what I want to do is I want to make sure that by the time I get here to decel, I can be somewhere around the 3,000 feet mark. And that's because we need to intercept what's called the ILS beacon so we can get the glide slope. Now, the whole point of ILS, and you'll see it in action in a minute, is that that's a frequency put out by the runway that we're going to, and that's actually going to help the plane just come in on a nice comfortable slope and land basically itself, but we'll take over at the very last minute, and once again I'll show you that once we get there. at this stage, I just wanted to let you know that it's this early on in the flight that I'm starting to get ready for our landing. I've come down. I'm assuming there's a much better way of doing this, because obviously you're not going to be doing this in real life, but if you're just in the flight sim, it really doesn't matter. So I will get back in touch with you once we start to make this turn and we reach decel. And welcome back. So now you can see that we have reached decel. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start getting the plane ready for landing. So you can see we're not that far away. And what we're going to do is, first things first, is with our instrument panel. So you can see our MFD here. What I want to do is I want to click on this LS button, because this is going to display our ILS information. So as soon as I do that, you can see there are 4 dots across the bottom, 4 dots up the right. These dots here along the bottom, these are our localizers. So this is our left and right, and that'll make sense in a minute. And up here along the right, this is going to be our glide slope. So this is what we're going to want to capture. So as we get closer to the airport, we're going to drop down, and that's going to all of a sudden capture the ILS. So we're making our turn now. If we have a look at our VFR map, you can see we've got decel, and then it's basically a straight shot into the airport. So it's good that we get ourselves ready nice and early. As I said, I mentioned to you that I got myself down to a low level pretty early on, but if you wanted to get yourself ready around here, you could. I guess it's up to you, especially in game. There's no real right or wrong. There are obviously going to be flight rules to follow in the real world, but it really doesn't matter too much. So the reason that I wanted to share this with you, as I said, is if you're someone who struggles to land an A320 or a 747 or really any plane that has ILS built into it, but the A320 I personally find is actually quite easy to control once you've gone through and set up your flight plan. So now that we've enabled ILS on our display, once we get closer, we're going to enable a few things. We're going to enable lock mode, which is going to get our localizer, and then approach mode, which is going to actually capture the glide slope. Now, what should happen fairly soon is we should be told to drop our altitude. And if we have a look down at our MFD, see this purple diamond? That's the localizer. So that's what is being projected by the ILS runway. And if we have a look on our other screen, you can now see it's picked up on ILS runway 16. This is what we selected on our flight plan. So it's all starting to show up nicely. Now, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to drop our altitude down to 3,000 feet, give ourselves some time, and hopefully it's going to drop nice and quickly. And we might even drop some flap just to wash off some speed.
Climb and maintain 10,000 feet ADAV 3112 tree.
And you can see this is the confusing part for me. So ATC in game, for some reason, they just want to keep you up really high. Not sure if that's something I'm doing wrong or if that's just a bug of the game, but they do seem to really want to keep you up very high. So just keep in mind when you're playing, you may need to ignore what ATC is saying. So if we zoom in, potentially that's our runway way off in the distance. So we need to make sure that we start dropping ground rapidly. And having our flaps out will help with that. What we can do as well, if you want a little bit extra realism, landing lights actually, sorry, they're already on. People probably shouldn't have been smoking anyway. But what you'll see now is we'll basically be able to glide on in once we get a hold of the glide slope. So we can actually see now the glide slope diamond is there. Unfortunately for us, it's quite low. We wanted that to be above the horizon, so we're trying to chase that now, which is going to get a little bit spicy. Once again, this is why I keep repeating myself that you want to drop your altitude nice and early. Now the good news is it looks like we've managed to catch up with our glide slope, so you can see this diamond coming up ever so slowly. Once it does, we're going to hit our approach mode, and this is basically going to then start our ILS procedure. So once he gets close to this yellow line, that's when I will click it over. Looking pretty good so far. Alright, so we might as well look over, see our approach button on our panel, and once I click on him, If we have a look at our display again, you'll see that we have our descent and we have GS, which is glide slope. And hopefully what will happen is that will lock on to the ILS of the runway, and that'll then take over. Bang, and there you go. So now it's locked on, it's green. We can drop our landing gear, because you can see that's not down at the moment, so we'll drop that down. And at this point, it's almost hands off. I say almost, because once we get over the piano keys of the runway, that's when we take back over. We're going to turn off autopilot, we're going to put up reverse thrust, and bring this thing to a stop. So what we can do is let's make sure that our speed brakes are armed. Let's go to our auto brakes, set that to max. And as I say, now we're going to sit back and let the plane take us in. So you don't have to move left and right, you don't have to do anything. And the reason why that's helpful is you can see even here, there's a pretty decent wind going on. So you can see the plane's having to work pretty hard to actually keep us lined up, which for me personally means I'd just be all over the shop. So I'm glad that the plane's doing it. And it's still going to be a little bit of work that once we get over the piano keys of the runway at the beginning of the runway, we're going to turn off autopilot and we are then going to land it. So at the moment, I don't have my hands on any of the controls. Once we get right on the runway, I'm going to put the throttle in my left hand, click my mouse with my right hand to turn off autopilot, and then hopefully bring this thing home. So it's not too difficult to use. I guess it's just a little bit fiddly. There's a bit of setup that you need to do, and you need to make sure that you're ready ahead of time. But the amount of effort you put in really does pay off. So we're coming in nice and low here. ILS doing a fantastic job. So left hand on throttle, right hand on mouse, getting ready to untick autopilot. I hope this is a good landing, otherwise I'm going to look a little bit foolish. And once autopilot comes off, I'm going to be hitting reverse thrust, I'm going to be hitting brakes. So as we come in nice and low,
100, 60, 50, 40.
Autopilot off, reverse thrust, brake. I think we've done a little bit of a bounce, we're down, we're good. Oh, we need rudder. Okay, so not the smoothest landing, not the best demonstration, but you get the point. Needed a bit more rudder. I really do need to fix the sensitivity of my rudder actually. And yeah, that's how you bring down a plane using ILS. So hopefully that was some use to you. If you're someone who is struggling with their landings, as obviously I still am, using ILS is going to be really helpful just because it's going to allow you to actually land the plane a bit more easier. It's, you don't have to judge the left and the right and how quickly you want to drop speed, what angle you come in on. Obviously using the ILS is just going to make things that much easier. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and I'll see you guys in the next video.